Hey there, friends and enemies, JoPa here again, and today I need to talk about the brand new exotic bow Wishkeeper in Destiny 2, which just dropped this week. This is a weapon I find to be very interesting, especially as a Titan main who still does enjoy a good suspend build, but I've heard people talking about how underwhelming this weapon is already, and I think it's far too quick to judge based on the fact that we don't have the full catalyst available. Yes, we can see what it is, but I'm going to jump into it later about why I think the Destiny community as a whole is far too quick to write off exotics that aren't immediately OP. So, first off, let's talk about where to obtain the new exotic and also what it does. First off, you will have to complete the Season of the Wish storyline up until you get to the Star-Crossed exotic mission. From there, you can complete the mission on normal. It's not all that difficult, and you can use Fireteam Finder in order to do so, and then you will unlock the Wishkeeper combat bow, and you will also be able to craft it at that point as well. And unfortunately, until week 5 of Season of the Wish at the earliest, you won't have access to any of the catalysts, much like Revision 0 and past exotic missions that are associated with craftable exotics. You won't have the full kit, like I mentioned, available right away. But what does the Wishkeeper do? It is our first strand exotic bow that has the intrinsic trait Snare Weaver. Precision hits and final blows build energy towards a Snare Weaver arrow that can be fired from the hip. On impact, Snare Weaver arrows create a pattern of traps that suspend nearby targets. This is built up over 5 different charges. One final blow that's not precision will give you 1 charge, whereas a precision hit will give you 2 charges. Then you also have the other intrinsic trait, Silkbound Slayer. This weapon deals bonus damage to suspended targets, gain faster draw time for a short duration when you suspend a target from any source, or damage a suspended target from this with this weapon. So essentially, if you're running a suspend build and you have multiple suspend options, you'll essentially be able to do significantly more damage, have that faster draw time consistently, and it just works out much better to go down that road. If you're not running a suspend build, this weapon is not going to be as good at this point, and that's something to keep in mind for sure. Now, with suspend builds, it does feel like it already is pretty solid overall. I do find it enjoyable. It's hard to replace Banner of War because that is still so strong. But I would say eventually Banner of War is probably going to get nerfed a little bit. So having this as an option is also very good. And in higher end content, if you're struggling to stay alive and you want to play at range a little bit more, this is obviously going to be a good option. Now, as far as the crafting goes, there are going to be much more options once we have all of the unlockables ready to go and you're able to complete likely the exotic mission on legend difficulty to obtain them. You're going to have better bowstrings, which will help out. Then you're going to also have better arrows as well, so increased accuracy and all that. That's not going to increase your damage, but again, if you have increased reload speed and you're hitting suspended targets and you're just instantly being able to fire nonstop, it could be a massive advantage for doing damage to different targets. Then we have the trait slot. That's just your standard Silkbound trait. But then we get to the catalyst. This is where things get very, very interesting. You can have Enduring Snare Refit. Snare Weaver traps last longer. And remember, you shoot the trap on the ground, so enemies who walk over it are going to get trapped. So if you're in a mission or activity that has a lot of enemies pushing you, then this trap works wonders. It is fantastic. You can also do multi-threaded snare refit as well. Snare Weaver traps can suspend more targets. So essentially, if you have waves and waves of enemies coming at you, you can have a bunch of them suspended at a given time. The reason it's too early to judge, in my opinion, is we don't know how much bigger or how much longer the Snare Weaver traps will last, and also how many more targets they can suspend. Then we also have Vorpal or Hatchling. Hatchling would be very interesting in combination if you are comfortable with the base version of the Snare Weaver traps. However, just keep in mind, if you want to really lean into the exotic, then one of the first 2 traits would be a better fit. Now, there's other different options as well. For you have a grip also that you can add on. But overall, I think this exotic is going to be really specific when it comes to certain builds. It's not going to be one that I think is going to be universally great. And that's something that I think a lot of people are looking at this point and why it feels underwhelming. But I do think in the right builds, it is going to be very, very good. We've seen it with past exotics like Osteostriga, where that weapon was pretty much underrated for quite some time. As people learned how to use it, as they understood that the catalyst provides so much and crafting the right perks on it makes such a big difference. And I think that's a massive advantage for something like Wishkeeper. You can make this the best feeling bow in the game with all the different options that you have for crafting this, as well as having it be an exotic with that Snare Weaver perk. So I also saw this with the Dragon's Breath when this first came out. These new exotics that come out that are going to have catalysts right away are going to be built and balanced around having those catalysts on the weapon. So you can't really judge them without the catalyst because it doesn't make sense. The Dragon's Breath, you're getting the catalyst right away. The Wishkeeper, you're getting the catalyst within a week or two. So having those balances around the catalyst essentially makes it so these weapons are not immediately overpowered, because if the base version is very good and then the catalyst makes it that much better, then there's a very good chance that they are going to be broken. So that's just something that I've seen consistently from the Destiny community. Is I don't think that any exotic that launches with a catalyst already ready to go should be judged until that catalyst is completed. It is fun to use oftentimes, but it's just an issue that I think, again, people are so quick to judge. There are a lot of fun Dragon's Breath builds, especially if you think outside the box and you're not necessarily using it in just a pure DPS type of way. And I think Wishkeeper will be a similar option in that certain activities, like you look at the Lake of Shadows, for example, Grandmaster Nightfall, that Lake of Shadows can be difficult at times because you don't have a lot of cover. But if you have a bunch of traps down and you're able to secure a location where you can stay alive and not have a bunch of enemies to deal with, it does make life a lot easier. And there's other activities in the game that have similar locations where survivability is so important, and having an option to just essentially suspend every target in the area is absolutely massive. But anyway, I do think that this is an exotic that I find to be very interesting. I think over time we'll look back and say, okay, this is pretty solid. It may not do the immediate work that we see in something like Trinity Ghoul that feels really strong right from the jump, but I do think ultimately it will be looked back as a pretty solid overall exotic, and I think there will be some builds that will make it very strong. So I'm looking forward to seeing how those all shake out. I'll definitely be working on some myself. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel. It helps me out tremendously. Shows you want to see more Destiny 2 content from me going forward. My name is JoPa. Have a good one, and I'll catch you all later.